Coming up on More Than Before.
Don't let the haters bring you down. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Don't worry about how people see you. You got this.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have a really awesome guest, and I know that it's going to be a hard-hitting episode. And I know that because he is a black belt in many different forms, from Kintsugo to Jiu-Jitsu to combat Hapkido. He is a second degree black belt in Krav Maga. He is an 8th degree black belt in Tang Soo Do. And if that wasn't impressive enough, he is a professional wrestler. That is right. He is our first professional wrestler on More Than Before, which is really exciting. But you know what I love about this guy so much is not only is he extremely gifted and a great teacher, but he is also highly successful because of his involvement and dedication to his family and serving his community. So I am so excited to have my brother on. Jason Flame, welcome to the program. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm amazing, man. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity. And, you know, sometimes when you hear your own bio, you're like, who are you talking about? Are you talking about me? I love it. I love it. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And, it's funny because, most times you're looking for, people's information. And when I came across yours, I was like, what am I going to cut out? Because there's so many good things here. Like I could have written a book just by the accolades that you have. I love it. It's so good. So
Thank you.
I always love to go back and take people back into people's childhood, of where they grew up, what childhood was like. So I knew you grew up in Newberry Park, California. Tell us a little bit about what was life like? What was childhood like? What was life growing up for Jason?
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you for asking that. Cause I love to talk about, the challenges that I faced growing up, the experiences that I had. Love talking about my family. So I'm excited about this topic for sure. I was born and raised in Thousand Oaks, California at Los Robles Hospital, which is only 10 to 15 minutes from where I'm living now and where I operate all of my businesses. So I'm kind of a native California boy. I lived in Oregon, Grants Pass, Oregon for maybe about a little over a year out of my life. But growing up in Newberry Park was awesome. I had 2 younger brothers. One was 4 years younger and one was 7 years younger. I had to do the math. And, we all got into martial arts. And so it was a lot of fun around the house, like you think about boys and all the rough and tough stuff that we did. But we also got to go out and ride 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, quads and ATCs. That was kind of our pastime growing up. My dad was huge into going to Pismo Beach here in California, going to the sand dunes. And that was just like one of my greatest memories growing up, is visiting Pismo dunes and going there and just being with my brothers, and camping was fun. And kind of got away from that as I got a little bit older. But, those were the things that we did as we were younger. As a younger child, I can remember a lot of things, a lot of ups and downs. My father was in construction, right? He started actually as a landscaper and got into learning the trades to the point where he was building custom homes from the ground up, right? Mm. And so, he was self-employed, and being self-employed, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. There was a lot of lessons of what it means to work for yourself and to own your own business, which are things that I took later in my life. But the ups and downs were sometimes the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. There were times that there was a time in my life that our family lived in a tent for several months, almost up to a year. I don't remember the exact time because my parents at that time had moved us out of the area up to Oregon, because that's where there was some work for him to do. But he was building us a house. He was building a house, and it wasn't ready yet. So, pitch a tent, and that's what we did. And he would hunt and had a garden, the whole deal, right? And then when we moved back, we were still kind of like through that phase of ups and downs. And my parents, my 2 younger brothers, and I lived in a 20-foot travel trailer for a couple of years where we literally had to connect a hose from our from our neighbor's house to our to the trailer to have running water.
Wow.
I can remember my mom having to turn on the stove to keep it warm because we didn't have we didn't have heaters. It was kind of crazy. But then there were other times in my life where my friends would make fun of me because when times were good and my dad had the money, he loved to buy toys and have all the stuff, and we a motorhome and quads and stuff. My friends used to actually joke. It would be like Memorial Day, and he's the, what do you get? Everybody asked, what are you getting for Christmas? What are you getting for Memorial Day? What are you getting for Labor Day? They thought it was funny that my dad would come home with these things. So the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, but I wouldn't trade it for anything because I learned so much about how to provide for my family, how to take care of my family, how to be together as a family. My parents have been married 50 years. But there were times I was like, I didn't know if they were going to make it to 20 years, because there's when the finances were low, there'd be lots of arguments. And, there were some other factors that played in there, when my dad's struggling and having a hard time and, just the stuff that comes along with that. Right. And so watching that as a child growing up was pretty hard, but to see them now and know that they've been married 50 years, it's like, yeah, you can have really bad times and get through those and have some really great times.
I love your story because I think a lot of people, especially when you've had as much success as you have, in the martial arts world, you go in and you help a lot of schools in the martial arts world to help them actually become profitable, which is really amazing. And definitely a conversation, which, by the way, if you want to hear more about that, make sure and go check out his podcast. And I'll mention that a little bit later on as we dive into the program here. But what I really love about Jason is truly your life isn't just all roses, right? There are those mountaintop experiences like in childhood where you just remember these amazing times, but then there's also these other times that kind of help to mold you of kind of who you are. I think there was, if I recall correctly too, you kind of had a crucible moment just outside of high school. Like you, if I remember correctly, you didn't have a good relationship with school, did you?
School was not my thing. I could not wait. I literally could not wait to get out of school. I don't know if it was, the ADD or what, but like sitting in a classroom, listening to a teacher talk about something I could really care less about, was really hard. And looking back, there's a lot of lessons that I understand now that I didn't even know then. But, watching my dad, be self-employed and not have a boss per se, and being able to kind of pick his schedule and really go after his passion. I learned very early on that I wanted to open a martial arts school. As a matter of fact, I was still a teenager when I decided that I wanted to become a martial arts school owner, become a martial arts instructor, because my instructor had given me the opportunity to, jump out on the floor and assist with classes and, learn how to help people learn what I loved so much. That was kind of the theme for me a lot of times in my life too, was that I found something that I loved. I loved it so much that I was given an opportunity to teach it. Then I started teaching it and finding out, wow, this is so cool. And then I can teach others how to teach it, and that cycle was just kind of a recurring theme in my life. But yeah, going to school was definitely not my thing. I had one really impactful teacher. He was my wood shop teacher of all people. And of course, being that my dad was, a carpenter and in construction, a home builder, that was I was kind of used to being around tools and used to being around wood and making things and using my hands and, not sitting in a desk. Right.
Yeah.
And so this teacher, though, not only gave me the opportunity to do something that was kind of fun and be involved in a class, carpentry, cabinet making. In Newberry Park, California, there's a historic landmark. It's called the Stagecoach Inn. And the Stagecoach Inn actually hired our program, our school, to come and build a replica of the Stagecoach School that was used back in the 1900s. And so I got to be, my class was the first class to start this project. And my younger brother was the class to finish it. So, I mean, like, how fitting that what my dad did for a living is what my brother and I were really into in school. And so that was just one of the things that kind of, he would take me on jobs too, this teacher, I don't even know if that was allowed, but, he'd hire me to do side jobs, but I realize now that he didn't hire me to do the side jobs. He hired me because someone would pay him to have a helper. And the whole time we were working, we'd be talking. And when we were talking, he'd be teaching me. And I didn't realize he was teaching me then, but, just little things about working hard and going after my passion and doing what I love and being who I am and believing in myself. He was actually the first person other than my parents that when I said, I want to open a martial arts school, he was like, you can do it. I know you can. Dream it and go after it. Randy Porter was the most influential teacher that I ever had in all of my years in school. And I graduated high school in 1992, right? We're talking 32 years ago. And I still remember this man for what he saw in me and what he believed in me. And that's what kept me in school. That's probably the only reason that I ended up graduating high school, because I really just wanted to take the GED. I wanted to go to adult school. I literally just wanted to drop out. And my parents just kept kind of pushing and reminding me to stick with it, even though neither one of my parents were high school graduates. Neither one of them graduated high school. They still gave me the little nudge to stick with it.
Wow. So I'm curious, because later on you went back to school and you got a college degree. So what made you go back to college? I mean, it's funny to me because, like when I graduated from high school, I was like, I do not want to go to college. I just want to be done. And I remember it was my martial arts teacher that actually looked at me and said, you need to go get a college degree. And I'm like, well, why do I need a college degree? He's like, so if you decide that you're going to do a martial arts school, if you want to teach, because I was like you, I wanted to start my own school. I wanted to grow it because I love the martial arts world. So much that I wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to it. And he looked at me, he said, because you'll never be able to look a student in the eye and tell them to go to college. If you haven't done it first, you can't tell someone else to go to college. So I'm curious, what drove you later on in life to go back to college then?
There's a very simple answer as to why I went back to college, and it's all about a girl. All about a girl.
I love it.
I graduated high school in 1992, had no aspirations to go to school any longer at all. Moore Park Community College is one of the top 10 community colleges in all of the United States. It's right here in our backyard. I knew about it, and I had friends that were going. I had friends that were going all over the place to school. But I just wasn't into it. And about 9 months later, I meet a girl at a football game. And that wasn't the most pleasant experience. And we didn't really connect then. But we met up later, and we connected. And that's an even longer story. But long story short, my wife graduated high school in 1993. She had automatically decided that she was going to Moore Park College. Her brother had gone to college, and her family was in support of it. They weren't really pushing it either. But so when she graduated high school, she immediately was registering for the fall, and she said, you should do it too. And the only reason that I did do it is because I knew I could spend more time with her, because we signed up for all the same classes. And for 3 years while we're at the community college, we took a lot of the same classes together. We both graduated with an associate's degree. So I hadn't yet made the transition to a further education. We both ended up transferring to California State University Northridge. And this was 96, within the first 6 weeks, I had to make a decision. I had to decide if I was going to, in fact, open that martial arts school that I had always dreamed of, or if I was going to pursue. Now the thought was, well, maybe I could be a PE teacher. I could be a teacher. Thinking back about Randy Porter, who was a big influence on my life. Well, hell, if he could have that big an influence as a wood shop teacher, maybe I'll go back and teach PE, and that'll be my supplement to the martial arts school, because what I knew about martial arts school owners at the time was that they could own a school and make a living, but it wasn't the most glamorous lifestyle from what I saw from the outside in. And so I had to make this crucial decision of, am I going to pursue my bachelor's degree in kinesiology, or am I going to officially open the martial arts school? Because I say officially because a couple years prior, in 1994, so timeline is 92 I graduated high school, 93 I meet my wife and start going to community college. In 94, with my then girlfriend, my wife now, we started a program at the Park and Recreation. And that's exactly how I started martial arts. I started in a Parks and Recreation program, not a karate school. This little room with carpet on the floor and clowns on the wall. We did martial arts in that room. And I remember thinking, okay, so that's how my instructor did it. If it worked for him, that's how I'll start mine. I started a Parks and Recreation program in 94. So over the next 2 years, I was building this up. In 96, I was faced with that choice. Do I want to take these students that I built up and open the school I always dreamed of? Or do I want to pursue the degree in kinesiology? And quite honestly, the answer came very easy to me. I want to run the school. And I want to do that. My wife went on to get her bachelor's degree in psychology, which is amazing. And she had a whole corporate plan. That fell apart when my daughter was born, and we decided that she was going to be a stay-at-home, just like my mom was. And, we run the businesses together.
Wow. I love that, because so often, I think even today, back then it was starting to become a little bit more rare that a wife would stay home with the kids, and even today it is by far a very rare thing to have any parent stay home with a child. Most times we're taking children to one place or another. I'm actually curious, how do you think that shaped you as a child? Because your mom helped in raising you and your brothers. You rambunctious children, probably destroying the house half the time.
Yep.
I can only imagine this, because my boys, even though that they're under 5 years old, and they destroy everything that they touch. So just imagine that, like, compounding every single year. What were some of those things that you believe that you actually took away from your mom, that have actually helped you later on in life? I know that your dad was a huge, influence on you, and we'll get to that maybe in a little bit here. But I'm curious on your mom, because you truly spent a lot of time with her. How did that influence you growing up to being the man that you are today?
I would say that as a child growing up, my mom was like my biggest cheerleader. All the boys, right? She would constantly tell us how proud she was of us. Constantly tell us there's nothing we can't do. Always told us that she believed in us. So there was just always that constant driving force of support. I said I want to open a martial arts school, and she was like, cool, right? Like, it was like anything that I wanted to do, she was in support of. Now, my mom was a lot different than how my wife is with our kids now. My mom was a stay-at-home mom who loved to garden. She loved to just kind of hang out, in the home, and take care of us. She did all the typical chores of the house, right? Cooking, cleaning, the whole bit, right? And as much as she supported us, she didn't really get out and my mom was never team mom. My mom was never, I was never really involved in team sports. It was my mom that put me into martial arts. And that was the activity that kind of triggered her a little bit to get a lot more involved. So, again, like, I remember she signed me up to play flag football. And I still remember this in my head. She signed me up for flag football. And I don't remember any other sports that I did prior to that, if any at all. But I remember crying so bad and so, like, sobbing, like, please don't make me go. I don't want to go. And what I remember from that is that she said, okay. We're not going. And who I am now, I wish she would have kicked me in the ass and said, get in the car, we're going. Because I didn't get to have the experience of playing football and all the sports. I played 1 year of baseball by the time I was 14 years old. Everybody had played baseball since the time they were 5. They all knew how to play way better than me. The only reason that I played baseball is because my younger brother got involved in baseball, and they got behind that. My dad was a big baseball player in his youth. It was a big deal, a big part of his life to play baseball, and he was a pitcher. And my brother became a pitcher, and that was kind of a really big bond for them. And so I played baseball because my younger brother played baseball. But I wish my mom would have pushed me. I wish she would have said, "Go play. Don't wuss out. Don't take the easy way. Just go and do it." But she did. She just let me not go to that tryout, if it was even a tryout at that age. But at 10 years old, she did sign me up for martial arts at the Parks and Rec. She brought me to class. Obviously, I couldn't, how else am I going to get there, right? I'm not riding my bike there. I couldn't drive. So mom was taking me. And I didn't realize this until much later. I didn't know this as a kid, really. But my mom wanted to do martial arts when she was a kid. And her parents told her, no, you can't do it. Girls don't do martial arts. I can't believe that they said that, because I would never agree with that now. Yeah. Having my wife, who is a 4th degree black belt, and a daughter who's a 2nd degree black belt, and some amazing female martial artists that are out there. But her parents told her, no, you can't do martial arts. It's not for girls, And so she had made a promise to herself. I believe that when she had kids, she would put them in martial arts. And I think that her interest in martial arts, by the way, was Elvis Presley. She was the biggest Elvis Presley fan on this earth. I mean, I don't know anybody that loves Elvis as much as my mom. And so I grew up listening to all the Elvis music. I love Elvis to this day. But, Elvis did martial arts. And so I think that's kind of, what sparked some of that. Because there wasn't really a lot of martial arts that was even popular back then. I mean, like Bruce Lee was Kato on the Green Hornet. Like, you didn't really see much martial arts other than that. And so, but she was very supportive once I got into martial arts. She never let me miss classes, always there for every test. And again, totally supportive. So my mom was really the cheerleader. She was really supportive, always believed in me and gave me a confidence. She used to say something, "You're the best, F the rest." That's what she would tell me all the time. I don't know why that sticks in my head and why I throw that out there now, but when I think of my mom, that I hear that in my head all the time. And I know what she meant by it was like, don't let the haters bring you down. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Don't worry about how, people see you. Just, you got this, And by the way, my theme song as a wrestler later in life was "You're the Best" from the Karate Kid. So we'll add that to, the more coincidences that come up, right?
Well, I love, I think there's something about moms that see something in you and they try to expand that in your life as best as they can. And I almost wonder if your mom saw you playing baseball and maybe she had a nose to say, you're doing this because you're seeking approval from your father. You're kind of seeking that bond. And maybe there was a bond there that your mom was like, I want you to be in martial arts. Yeah. But there's something, I don't know, there's something about when you see your kids starting to do something that they're really good at, that's when you start pushing them in. Like I remember for me, and I didn't learn this until later on in life, but I got all the way up to a brown belt and then I was going to quit. I was literally months away from taking my black belt test. And I was like, I'm just going to quit. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm sick of it. And my mother, I love her. She said, no, you're going because we paid for it. You're going for the rest of the semester because we paid for the semester and we don't get our money back. You go and you get to do this. You don't get an option. And what's funny is if my mother hadn't pushed me at that place, in that point in my life, I wouldn't have had a 3rd degree black belt in my life, because I wouldn't have pushed myself. I wouldn't have gotten to that place because I think my mother ultimately knew it was something that I needed to do, but maybe I was distracted by other things. So I almost wonder if maybe that's something that your mom had the perception of going, you know what? I don't think baseball's his thing. Let's put him in some other things. And then, martial arts, she's like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to push hard on this. I'm curious, in your life, at what point did you start to toy with the idea of being a professional wrestler? Because I mean, martial arts, like most people, they think of like, oh, martial arts, punching, kicking, hitting, those kinds of things. They don't really think about it in terms of the sport of martial arts, right? Like, forms and those kinds of things. When you transition into wrestling, it almost seems like a completely different field. In some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it's not. There's performance, there's techniques. How in the world did you go from martial arts to professional wrestler?
Well, it was actually martial arts led me to professional wrestling and gave me the opportunity to get involved. So as a young child, and growing up, like the WWF and WCW as a teenager, watching those and watching the Monday Night Wars. But even before that, to me, like Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man Randy Savage, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, right? Karate guy.
Yeah.
Watching that was way better to me than Batman, Superman, or any superhero, right? So like turning on pro wrestling and with two brothers, right? We're doing suplexes and body slams on the bed and all the stuff, right? And so I just grew up loving it, right? Absolutely loving it. And, as a teenager, then the attitude era started kind of about, early 20s, kind of finishing up the community college. I've pretty much made the decision that I'm not going on to pursue my college career, and I'm going to open a business, right? Mm-hmm. Well, remember before I was talking about like the PE teacher thing was kind of the backup to being the karate school owner. Well, then I started thinking, well, maybe I could be a pro wrestler and own a martial arts school. I remember telling my brother-in-law, I'm like, I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to get to like 250 pounds. I'm going to go try out. He kind of laughed at me, and everybody kind of laughed at me and thought that was the most ridiculous and silliest thing ever. I got to the point where I really got serious about it. Back then, there was no internet. Like I couldn't just go online and Google it. And,
there wasn't YouTube.
No. I had to. So I had to write a letter to the school. It was Ultimate Pro Wrestling, and that's where John Cena trained. And I wrote a letter. Ended up connecting with a guy named Big Schwag, Brett Wagner. And we had a phone conversation. He received like my application in the mail, and he invited me. He's like, come down, come check it out. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went down with a couple friends, and I went to the school, and I walk in the school, and I'm like pumped the whole way getting there. And when I walk in the door and I look at the people that are in the ring, the Ballard brothers, who famous tag team here in the SoCal area, they were the trainers at this gym. And I'm watching and standing there and listening, and one of them comes up to me and they say, so are you here for class? Are you here to train? And I took this big deep breath and hesitated, and I said, actually, I'm just here to watch. And they said, okay, cool. Well, hang out. Let me know if you have any questions, whatever. And I stayed for a little bit, and I ended up leaving. Wow. Because, I'm watching these guys in the ring, dude, and they're just massive. Like what I saw on TV and who I was at that time. Like I'm 5'10". Like, and if I was 220 then, like, okay. But like these guys are massive, and they're super, like, over the top. It's like watching, a professional do something when you have no experience at all. And so I walked out. I walked out and never went back. And so about 15 years later, right? And by the way,
just a little time later.
Yeah. But I had always, and I kept watching wrestling. I love wrestling. 15 years later, I'm in my martial arts school. A gentleman comes in the school and he says, I have an opportunity for you. I would love to help you promote your martial arts school. I mean, he was pretty good at marketing too. Like he said all the right things, got me hooked. His name is Barry Cohen. They called him BS Cohen. And so he came in, man, and he turned it on, and he knew just the buttons to push. And he said, why don't you come down to the show? You can set up a table, you can hand out your flyers, you can do the whole bit. I'm like, I'm in, like what is this? And he says, oh, it's just this, we have a pro wrestling show at the Boys and Girls Club in Simi Valley. And I go, are you serious? Like I didn't even know that it was about pro wrestling. He was so good that he told me he was a promoter. He didn't really say what it was. And so I said, absolutely. I go, I do a couple shows where I set up a table. Like at this time, my son is, we have both our kids. My son is, what is he? 4, 5, 6 years old, young. And he's starting to kind of get into wrestling, right? Like he likes it. And so now I'm like, oh, my kid likes it, and we get to be it. So he comes and he helps hand out flyers, and he's got pictures with title belts on. I end up meeting the owner of the organization, Logan X, and he says, well, hey, I mean, listen, do you want to bring your kids down and let them perform in the ring? That'd be cool. We could do a little demo. And I'm like, okay, well, that's awesome. And he goes, well, what do you think about getting in the ring? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I mean, do you want to get in the ring? And I'm like, well, yeah. He's all, well, we have a school here in Chatsworth, if you want to come train. And I'm like, okay, this is the second time in my life this opportunity, kind of comes up. I'm like, I'm not missing out on this. I'm 38 years old at this point, right? And I say, yeah, let me get the information. And I go and I train at the school. It was Bump U. The head trainer was Seth Skyfire, who was a standout in OVW wrestling, which is getting a big push right now because of the show on Netflix, Wrestlers. He's a big deal in OVW, tag team champion with CM Punk. He's a known guy. Like he should have been a signed guy, but like me, 5'10", not too big, good flyer, but didn't have the size that, what Vince was looking for at that time. Anyway, he's the coach and trainer, and I'm training and taking class. And finally I get the opportunity to have my first match. It was terrible. It was a piece of garbage. I looked awful. But like, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world to be in the ring. And since then I have had, over 100 matches, which is not a lot as a pro wrestler goes, but 100 matches for being a guy who was 38 years old and had a dream of being a pro wrestler. And as my bio will tell people, I've been a several-time champion in Millennium Pro Wrestling. And I just love it. I have a match coming up December 22nd versus arguably one of the best pro wrestlers that has ever come out of Millennium Pro Wrestling, Mr. Danny Devine. And it's amazing that I still get to be a part of it. So
I love that. What I love about a lot of your story, the fact that there are times where you have this vision of what it is that you want, what it is that you desire in your life. And I think a lot of people experience this, like they think about it, they want to pursue their dreams. They even take steps towards that. And the time between investment and payoff is a really long time.
mm-hmm.
In fact, a lot of opportunity is like that. You prepare for it, and then you continue to prepare for the opportunity to present itself. And, I love the fact that you say you had one opportunity for it and you walked out. And then you had a second opportunity and you said, oh my gosh, I am not going to miss this again. I'm getting in that ring. And I love that. At one point, I even recall that you said at one point you found yourself living in a 20-foot trailer, a travel trailer with 5 family members, relying on the support of other people around you for food and for clothes. Like, life was not always on the up and up. Like there
Right.
are major dips in people's journeys. And I think a lot of people right now, they have dreams. They've maybe taken a couple steps. They've maybe had some really hard doors closed in their face. They've lost money. They've lost opportunities. And maybe it hasn't worked out quite that much, but I would love to hear a little bit about that specific story. You find yourself in your travel trailer, you're with your family, you're trying to make things work. Things don't seem to be working quite in the way that you want. What brought you from a place right there to where you are today? What do you think that was mentally?
Yeah. I mean, at that time, I was in absolutely no control of that situation, right? It's my mom, my dad, my two brothers, and myself, right? And I want to say this is probably in the ages of, maybe 9, 10, 11, probably around that time frame, right? Now, of course, living in that travel trailer was rough, but at the same time, I mean, we had Christmas in this, in this travel trailer. We had birthdays in this trailer, right? And when I say trailer, I'm not talking about like a trailer home. I'm talking about like a 20-foot. You attach it to your truck and pull it from here to there. We were in the same spot. We were living on the land that, once again, for the second time, my father was building my parents' dream home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he has done this more than 5 times, I believe, where he has built our home from the ground up. And so we're living in the trailer because they own the land, and the plan was to build this house. And from then until now, I mean, geez, so many things have changed. But what hasn't changed is remembering how little we had and how I didn't even know it was a big deal.
Mm.
I went to school wearing hand-me-downs that, who knows, where we got them. I went to school having donuts from a brown paper bag that our neighbors brought home to us because they were left over from Bob's Big Boy. That was my breakfast. Thinking, I got clothes, I got food. Like, looking back now, I don't know how my parents did it, man. I really don't know how they did it, because I know as I know my dad and I know how I am. That had to be a very humbling experience. Now, of course, my dad is a pretty minimalistic guy too. Like, he could pull up and just camp anywhere, but he's built these houses that are the most amazing houses and huge and decorated the whole bit. So it's like, I've seen both sides. I've seen that lowest low. And sometimes that's the driving force for me. Sometimes that's the reminder that I don't ever want to end up there. I thank God that my children have never had to live that life. I made it. I'm strong. I feel good that I went through it. I would never want my kids to go through it. But if they did have to, I know that I've seen it. I've been there. And then I've been on the flip side. Like I said, my dad built these houses that were the biggest houses with all the toys and all the stuff, and so I knew it, even as an adult. I've been in the situation where our business was doing so ridiculously well. I didn't even know how to manage my money or do anything right. Like, I buy toys, buy stuff, buy the things. I think that having very little and having a lot, I'm not as affected by all of it so much, especially now too. I feel like in this stage of my life, as I get closer to 50 years old, a lot of the stuff, that I've desired and worked for, it's like the most important thing to me now is what must have been important to my parents, is that our family stuck together. Our family took care of each other, and we spent time together. That's the most important thing to me now, is that I get to be with my wife. I get to be with my kids. They're still, 21 and 18. They're still living at home for now. And they haven't moved out yet. But it's just like, that's everything to me. Time is everything to me. All the other stuff is kind of faded away. But yeah, looking back, there's still a little piece of me that says, like, where you've been, keep looking forward, keep moving forward, and learn and grow from that.
Kind of reminds me of the Les Brown quote where he says, money isn't everything. And he said, but everyone wants to find out for themselves. Right.
Right.
And it's funny though, because even as I've grown older, as you've grown older, you kind of come to this point where stuff really is meaningless. Like it doesn't matter how big the toy is or how great the toy is. At the end of the day, family, your relationships, the people that you get to pour into, those are truly some of the greatest things that you can have in your life. And I want to circle back because I'm curious about this. You and your wife have been married for a number of years.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you guys have gone through your ups and downs. But one of the things that's, I think, really fascinating to me is that many people today struggle within their relationships with their spouse. But not only that, if you were to add a business component into that, I think a lot of people think, oh my gosh, Jason's absolutely insane. He not only is he married to this woman, but he's also working side by side with her every single day. I'm curious, what have been some of those lessons that you've pulled from your parents' relationships? Because for them to be married for 50 years, for them to go through financial ups and downs, having the great house, but then also living in the tent, living in the trailer, like you got to watch your parents go through those stretching moments. How did
Mhm.
those affect your marriage? And what were some of those things in your own marriage that you hope that your kids kind of take on, that they are able to emulate later on in their relationships?
There were a lot of things that my parents taught me about marriage that remind me of what I want to be. But there was also a lot of things that my parents taught me of what I didn't want my marriage to be.
Mm.
And I think that my parents are so very different people. My parents have very different interests. They met when they were teenagers. They were married. My mom, I believe, was 18. I think my dad was 20. And so they were young, real young. And I am absolutely proud of the fact that of all my friends and all the people I know, almost every single one of my friends' parents were divorced, had broken up. My parents are still together. Now, through those financial hardships, were some of the worst arguments and fights, disagreements. And that was really, really hard to watch. I don't know if my parents were the absolute best at communicating to each other.
Mm.
And so, again, the long lasting relationship, for better or for worse, that part, I take that part, because marriage for me is forever. Marriage is not a let's get married and see if it works. Marriage is a promise to each other, a promise to God, and a promise to ourselves to be true and to be faithful and to stay together.
Mm.
And so that part I'm super grateful for. My wife and I are also very different. I would say that I was the kid from the other side of the tracks that was a little rough and from the, rougher side. And my wife was a little bit more, a little more spoiled, right? Listen, I grew up in Newberry Park. She grew up in Agora Hills, right? Like, the hills. So it was a different lifestyles,
Yeah.
right? I mean, she had a pretty straight and normal, whatever that might be, relationship with her parents and growing up. The differences that we have are what make us so great.
Mm.
Is that everything that she is complements who I am, and everything I have to offer, I believe complements her. So together, we make such an unstoppable team because all the things I don't like to do, all the things I don't want to do when it comes to our businesses or it comes to our service, she's really good at it, man. She's just so good. She's exactly the wife I wanted to have to be a mom to my kids because not only did she get to stay home because that was not her, my wife, had planned to have a corporate job, and so we would have a dual income household. And quite honestly, I thought that she was going to be the breadwinner. I thought she was going to be the one to be taking care of me. And she didn't want kids. She didn't like kids. I love kids because I taught kids. When we got together, so much morphed and changed. I wanted kids. She didn't. Well, we end up having two amazing kids, a boy and a girl. My daughter is just like her. My son is a lot like me, and they both share qualities of either one of us. And my wife became the mom that I think I wish that my mom would have done some more of the things that my wife does. And maybe I only think that now, seeing it, looking back, right? But
Yeah.
my wife has been room mom, team mom, and involved in literally every aspect of everything that my kids have done from the time they were born until today. Like, I mean, she's still so super engaged, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, in our business, right, people ask all the time, how do you guys work together? Well, first of all, we don't sit across the table from one another, and we don't have to be in the same building at the same time all the time. She handles the stuff that she handles really well. I handle the stuff that I handle really well. And we have cultivated and created a team that does everything else. And so that's how we're able to work together, is we really have a good understanding of who is responsible for what and who is better at doing certain things than others, and staying in our lane. You know, I'm not going to sit here and tell her how to do what she does, because she does it well. And she's not going to tell me, well, she might sometimes, but tell me how to do what I do, because she knows I do it so well. And so not only have we built the martial arts school together, because again, remember, we've been married. Next year will be 25 years.
Wow.
And we had been dating 6.5 years prior to that.
Wow.
So we've been together, you know, quite a while. And from day one, man, she was at when I started that park and rec program, I was in uniform on the mats, the fold out mats that I had to put out every time we went in. And we would set her up a little table and a chair, and she was the front desk. She would check everybody in, do the paperwork, do all the face-to-face. I would do all the teaching, right? Yeah. And so it's always been like that. And you know, in our community service, she is an amazing community connector. She knows how to put the right people together. Between my wife and I and two other couples, we helped create an event called Holiday on High Street. High Street is a historic landmark here in our city. It goes right through the center of town, and that's kind of where all the magic happens. Well, we decided that we don't really have an event that celebrates the holidays. We've got a Country Days parade, and we've got this and we got that, but we don't really have anything in the holidays. And as a group of 3 couples sat down and had a conversation 3 weeks later, that we put on an event with several thousand people, where we had a tree lighting ceremony and the snow and all the stuff. My point is that now we're in our 4th year or 5th year, and my wife really kind of spearheads the event a lot more than she did before, and has a group of people that she works with, and she could bring all the right people in and bring all the right people together. I always say people love her. Like, they don't love me the way they love her, right? It's just, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I'm just
they love her because she's kind and she's got that great, you know, you want to be around her. They love you, but you're just you know, what's that old saying? I think it was a Bucky Covington song. I learned religion between a Bible and a belt. You know, mama was the one that, you know, loved and cared for me and was really kind, and dad was like the fire and brimstone, like, yeah. And maybe that's probably, you know, between you and your wife. Your wife is a little bit more of the nice, like, oh yeah, we want to spend a lot of time with her, and it's like, well, Jason's really great when you need to get things done.
Yeah. And that's funny, because I always joke with her. I'm like, everybody loves you, I'm just good at heavy lifting, you know. So you know, again, like, the working together thing has been, I mean, it's been so easy, like literally gift from God that this woman was put in my life, because from day one, she was just as supportive as my mom was. Everything I did. And you would think that, like, you know, a woman that's getting ready to, you know, a young lady that's getting ready to get married to this guy who's starting a karate school that doesn't,
hey, maybe you should get a real job. Maybe you should go find something down the street, you know, a 9-to-5 job, right? Yeah.
Heard it a million times, but she was always like, all right, well, what do we need to do? What's the next step? How do we make this happen? You know, never a doubt, and never once said, everybody else would say, when are you going to get a real job? Never once asked me that.
Wow.
Like even when we were married, when we first got married and she had her corporate job, you know, she'd get up at 6 a.m., take off for work. I'd get up at like 10 or 11 because I didn't have to be in the karate school until like 3. She would get up and like leave, seeing me in bed, sleeping, you know, like, I mean, I'd get up, clean the house a little bit, you know, I kind of take over some of that responsibility, but I was like, I don't know. Like,
I mean, it's not the equivalent nowadays of, you know, the wife gets up and leaves and then, you know, her husband's sitting and playing video games on the couch. You know, it's it's a little different. But you know, one of the things I think that makes this so amazing, and I don't know if this would have worked as well if you both hadn't been so in tune with who you were created to be. Like you guys knew what your gifts were. You knew what you were good at. And you guys stuck in your lanes. You didn't cross lanes. Maybe you discussed things here and there. But I think a lot of times in marriage, what we do is we look at the other person. We say, well, you're not good at this and you're not good at that. And, well, it's just not going to work. Versus looking at the person going, oh my gosh, you're really good at the books. You're really good at marketing. Oh, well, you're really good at the teaching aspect, and, you know, fill in the blanks. And I think a lot of times we don't look for the good in our spouse. We don't look at their gifts. We look at their downfall. We look at the things that they're not good at. And I think that's what really makes this spectacular of what you're saying, is that you both knew who you were going into this. And because of that, I think that truly expanded and contributed to the success that you've seen.
Now, I will tell you, if we're going to talk about pro wrestling again, and this is a subject where that whole thing about my wife being supportive and loves everything, and pro wrestling is the one area that is not her favorite. And just because you talked about, you know, injuries change your life. I actually dislocated my shoulder in a wrestling match, and had to finish the match with a dislocated shoulder, which was the worst pain I've ever suffered. I literally had something that I loved so much be ripped away from me because I couldn't do it, you know, and it took me, you know, more than a year to recover. And of course I made a comeback. But that, you know, those types of things. And I've had other injuries that have sidelined me from the things that I love. And it's really hard. And especially as I continue to get a little bit older and my body is, you know, getting older with me, you know, I struggle with the athlete and the competitor that I was as a young man versus who I am now. Like, you know, getting in the ring, I'm not the same guy that I was even when I was 38 years old, let alone when I was a high-level competitor in my 20s. And it's hard to look in the mirror and say to myself, like, you know, just go out there and give it your best shot, you know, go out, give it all you got. And that's still not even close to what I once was. You know, that's a very humbling piece of information, piece of, you know, experience that I've got to live with, where it's like, I'm not even a shred of the person that I once was. In that respect, having said that, I'm much wiser as a 50-year-old guy to know what I can do and what I shouldn't do and what I won't do now that I probably would have just thrown caution to the wind at 20 years old. What's the worst that'll happen, you know? So definitely some trade-offs there.
Yeah. You know, I love that. And it leads kind of into this last question I have for you. But before I ask you that question, you know, Jason, I've really loved having you on the show. It's been so fun diving into your story, learning about your past, learning kind of who you've become throughout your journey in life. And really what you do today is truly amazing. And I think it's because of who you are, and it's because of the people that you've surrounded yourself with, the team that you've built around you, whether that's your family or whether that's the team that you've actually employed around you in your martial arts school. But, you know, for those of you listening, I really want to encourage you, go check out Jason's podcast, the Master Motivation podcast. It's absolutely spectacular. I love it. You might even find an episode of me on there too, if you want to learn a little bit more about my story. But one of the things I love about that podcast is you really get to understand more of the mechanics of martial arts, what goes on behind the scenes, but you get to meet some really cool individuals that are on there from the wrestling world, but also from the martial arts world. So go check that out. Jason, so many people in the martial arts world, and I think even in the wrestling world, this kind of goes over in that direction too. But so many people make massive investments in their body. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that we should train our bodies. We should make sure that we're putting the right fuel in our bodies. We want to make sure that we're fit enough that as we get older, we're not going to fall apart, right? But I think that there's a habit that a lot of martial artists have, that a lot of school owners that a lot of wrestlers have, that they focus more on the training than focusing in on their mind of what are they learning, not just in the dojo, in the school, but outside. And I know that you have spent a lot of time, a lot of money investing in your own mind, expanding your mind, learning about leadership, learning about communication. And I'm curious, why is outside learning, why is mastering the mind so important? I know there's kind of a little bit of an inkling when it comes to martial arts that we go, oh yeah, when you master your mind, you master your body. Yes, that's true. But there's another key to this. It's not just mastering mind and body. It's also mastering learning, which I think that you are a lifelong learner. Since I've known you, you go out and you learn at the feet of other people. That's why I think you're a humble guy. I think that you know way more than you actually lead on to, because you're constantly learning at everything that you do. Why is life learning so important?
When it comes to being a life learner, if you're in a position of leadership, right? And I'm working with students, right? I mean, at some point, they're going to get to a level where what do you still have to offer? I can remember as a younger school owner and martial artist, I would get people to black belt and they'd be so good. I mean, just so good. But then after they got their black belt, I was like, why don't they keep improving? And why aren't they learning more? And you know why? Because at that time, I wasn't learning more. I got to a level and that student got to that level, and now they can't go any higher because I haven't given them the opportunity to bring them higher. And so that's where it all started for me, is when I noticed that my students were not continuing to excel, and I had to look in the mirror and say, it's because you're not excelling. Because, I trained a lot when I was a kid, and I competed a lot when I was a kid. And then when I first started teaching, I got so focused on teaching and coaching that I was not expanding my learning anymore. I was doing the same things for the longest time. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So I started learning other styles of martial arts. My background is in Tong Soo Do. Well, I started learning Ketsugo Jiu-Jitsu. And then I learned the combat Hapkido. And then I got involved in extreme martial arts training. Then I got involved in Krav Maga. So I'm expanding my knowledge in different arts so that I could offer and provide for my students. In doing that, I also noticed my business, it was the same. I was doing the same thing that my instructor, who has been a school owner since 1974, the year I was born, I was doing all the same things that he had always been doing. But I wasn't trying to learn anything new. I was only trying to get better at doing the same thing, but I wasn't adding anything to the mix. So I searched for a coach and a mentor who could help me take my business to the next level. And I got involved in a coaching consulting program that taught me so much about martial arts business that I never had any idea of. And that led me to, starting to be a speaker. Well, now I'm a white belt at speaking. And I got to learn how to speak. I got to learn, I would have a pad of notes and I would get up and I would read them like this. And it took me a long time to be able to get up there and I don't even like notes when I don't even want bullet points when I get up and read sometimes. I just want to get up and talk. And it's so much easier. My son actually asked me the other day, he's like, Dad, how do you get up there and teach one class for 45 minutes on the same thing? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that go into that, disguising repetition and, teaching the background and history, teaching, why we do things, what are the benefits. And I started kind of walking him down these paths, and I have these bullet points already in my head that he hasn't worked his way through yet. And then I'm speaking and I become a consultant and I'm helping other business owners. And then, I start a podcast. I don't know anything about podcasting. Don't know. And then I start just having these guests on the show that like literally every single week. And just like when you were on the show, everybody that I have on my show, I'm learning from them. And so I'm constantly reaching for that extra bit of knowledge, that extra bit of experience, so that I can continue to add to how I pour into other people. And the more I pour into other people, they can pour into the next, and so on, that ripple effect. But I think it's also important to constantly have someone that pours into you, because if I don't have someone keep pouring into me, I run out of. So it's a cycle that we all help each other through.
I love that so much, because so many people, I think they get stagnant in their learning. They think, okay, well, I'm good at this and that's all I need to be good at. I don't need to branch out. I don't need to do anything else. And what's really interesting is as I've grown older, as I've been looking and learning from different disciplines, I love the fact that you have black belts. You learn in so many different styles of martial arts. You and I both know that most people, when they get into martial arts, they pick one and they never try another one. And what do they say? Well, the best martial art is my martial art, right? There's always this kind of pride that pops up. But you know what's interesting? I have found that there are different martial arts that are better at certain things than other martial arts. And if you start to learn them all, you start to grow, you start to develop. When I started doing more work with, underwater training, I started to learn more about breathing and breath technique and why it's better to breathe through the nose and, accessing parasympathetic response. And like, you start learning all these things and like, oh, I can put this here and I can put this here and I can teach people this. And all of a sudden your mind, your world expands because you've learned something. And I think truly the death of a person is when they become stagnant and they say, I'm okay. Right. I'm okay. I don't need to learn anymore. And so I absolutely love this. I love this about you, that you are a lifelong learner, not just because you want to improve yourself, because you want to improve other people. And I hope you hear that. If you're listening to this right now, I hope that you are pouring into someone else. I hope that you share this episode with someone, that you pour into them, or not even this episode, anything that you're learning right now, whether it's a book or a podcast or YouTube or whatever it is, go and pour into someone's life. Jason, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I know so many people have been poured into today from your life, from the lessons that you've learned and the lessons that you've been able to give us, that I've learned from you. To all of you listening out there right now, thank you so much for listening to the show. Make sure to like, rate, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend, especially with a friend in the martial arts community. And if you are in that community of martial arts, check out Jason. Go reach out to him. He's got some really great tools that can help you out. Until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.